Hello everyone, it's Spooly from Spooly Gaming, and today I'm going to discuss my top 6 areas that will help you improve as a deathmatch player. So, who am I? Well, I'm also known as Major KD in the community, and I'm a long-standing Age of Empires player with experience in 1v1 deathmatch. Now, the 6 areas we're going to cover today are the first 5 minutes, the rush, build order, hotkeys, unit control, map control, and economy. Now, I appreciate this may have been done to death, but let's just explore the first 5 minutes. I'm going to go over a series of do's and don'ts, starting with the opening seconds. Do send your scout to the space beside the main gold of the enemy. Their town center will be close by. Get your villagers working. 1 villager on a house and then 2 on a stable or barracks is common, and you can also split these villages to create, say, 2 stables or 2 barracks if necessary. Don't start to build an economy. And certainly try not to build anything that costs you time and makes your villagers vulnerable. As the game progresses, do build an army quickly, and also begin patrolling outwards in the direction of the enemy. I will explain more about how to patrol and attack move later in this video. Don't try to do too much too quickly, and really try not to wait for the enemy to make the first move. When your army meets, do practice controlling your units, and also practice building outwards towards the enemy with structures like castles and other military buildings that you might need. Don't let your army patrol in with limited or no control, and really try not to leave too much space between the enemy's push and the heart of your base. The rush. The rush has 2 main aims. Kill off as many villagers as you can, and slow the enemy's ability to expand and or create military units. The most notable way to rush is to set waypoints from your military structures into your enemy's base. You can do this by using the minimap to navigate to the enemy's base and then place waypoints at the back and or to the sides. When your units have traveled to your enemy's base, select them and then right-click on the enemy villages to get them to attack. I appreciate that this will take practice, but the more you do it, the better you'll become. It's really important to know that games can be decided like this, even between top players. This may not be an exhaustive list, but units that can be used to rush include the Paladin, the Heavy or Imperial Camel, Cavalry Archers, the Gothhuskal unit, Eagles, and the Hussar used by the Cumans. Build order. With build order, you generally have 2 aims. Build units that capitalize on the civilization's strongest unit, or strongest combination of units. Play to the strength of your civilization's unique bonuses. Let's take a look at the Franks. Now, Franks have 3 staple units that you will often see being used. They include the Paladin, the Halberdier, and the Axeman. These 3 units are simple to use and individually strong, but each have their own weaknesses. A helpful way to think of it is to use the rock, paper, scissors game. Rock beats scissors, scissors beats paper, and paper beats rock. The units you create work on the same principle. Let's imagine that we're playing rock, paper, scissors, and I play paper and you play rock. If I only kept playing paper and you continually played rock, then I would continually win. To stop that from happening in a game of rock, paper, scissors, we will choose when to play each one, and the logic is applied in the same way when you look at Deathmatch. The difference is that rather than taking turns to play our respective choices, they're usually interacting at the same time. If we assume that Axemen represent rock and Halberdiers represent scissors, we don't want to use our Halberdiers against the Axemen unless we have no other choice. Learning unit counters is really important so that you understand when it is a good time to attack. This is especially true when these units are used in combination with another. So how does this analogy help me to improve my build order in Deathmatch? Well, it's important to understand these interactions so that you can make appropriate choices about what buildings you will create and how many. Much of this can be learned from trial and error. However, think about each unit's role, how they will interact, and the order that you want to produce them in. For example, in Franks, you want to produce Paladins first, and then Halberdiers, and then Axemen, and in that order. The reason is because whilst Axemen represented rock in the earlier example, and Halberdiers scissors, Paladins would therefore represent paper. In a mirrored Franks war, paper beats rock and we can see how this interaction, especially considering how slow axemen would be to produce, would potentially lose you the game. There are admittedly some variations, like when each of these units can beat their respective counters, but this is predicated usually on numbers, and there will always be a certain cost in doing so. To provide an overview of popular 1v1 build orders, I have included the following. It's common for the Franks to have between 5 to 8 stables, 4 to 7 barracks, and 3 to 4 opening castles, plus houses, producing paladins, halberdiers, and then into throwing axemen. The Mayans usually have between 5 to 8 barracks, 3 to 4 opening castles, and 2 to 3 siege workshops, plus houses, producing eagle warriors into plumed archers and rams. And finally, the Huns usually have between 4 to 6 stables, 4 to 7 barracks, 7 to 9 archery ranges, and 2 to 3 siege workshops, producing paladins, halberdiers, and then into cavalry archers and rams. All of these civilizations can sell extra resources at the market for an additional gold boost. If you would like more information on build orders for these or other civilizations, or for more on how to use markets successfully, I would be happy to put this into a separate video. Hotkeys. Well, hotkeys are really important, and they will improve your overall speed in the game. Now, speed is really important in Deathmatch because if your opponent can do something faster than you can, chances are they will hold a greater advantage. Hotkeys are really subjective. What works for me might not work for you. But here are some general considerations. Place hotkeys closely together. If I am controlling my unit formations on the fly, I want to be able to switch between them quickly, so I don't want to spread them out over my keyboard. Place high priority keys in the easiest places to hit. You want to get round your structures and units quickly, so ideally you want to navigate to these with a single press on the keyboard. If you want to use a modifier, like control for example, consider using these for things that you press the least. I personally use the control key to build structures that free up single keybinds. This helps me to navigate to buildings that will be used more overall. I also use my mouse to select idle villagers and my town centre or town centres, as well as using the spacebar for selecting idle military. If I use down on the mouse wheel whilst holding control, I select all visible military land units. If I use down on the mouse wheel whilst holding control and alt, I select all of my military structures for waypointing. Just note that this does select the monastery or monasteries if you have built some to grab relics. Work to improve hotkeys that cause you problems in-game. Do you sometimes miss a keybind in a crucial moment or not press them at all? Chances are you have them bound in a way that isn't intuitive, or perhaps they just don't work well for you. Consider this. If it were easy, what would it look like? Try to simplify hotkey commands to those that you use most. So go ahead and open Notepad or Microsoft Word and just write a really quick list of keys you press a lot. Now, if you don't currently use hotkeys, just have a think about the types of things you might use hotkeys for or would really help you. Once you've got these hotkeys or an idea of these hotkeys, put them into groups and then prioritize them. This will then help you to understand which keys hold greatest priority before you bind and learn them. Consider rebinding if you have low priority keybinds in high priority positions. Unit control. Unit control is very important. In fact, it is so important that it is likely to be one of the best things to master after hotkeys. The reason why it's so important is for two reasons. One, killing more of your enemy's units will build an advantage over time. And two, resources that are surplused as a result of good unit control can be used to create a second or third army. Mastering this might seem challenging, but when you break it down, it's afforded in two ways. Look after your army and try not to let it needlessly die. It's important to fight and trade kills and deaths, but not at the expense of being left at a disadvantage. Try not to get too distracted by other things going on around the map. The fight between units is the priority, and everything else is also important, but usually always secondary. Consider, how are you using your time when you play Deathmatch? What caused you to be at a disadvantage to your enemy's unit control? And what did he or she do better than you? Asking questions like this will help you identify your weaknesses. Let's look at a few tips that may help you. Stances. Now, stances, or unit states as they could be known, govern how that unit interacts. There are three stances to be aware of. The first is aggressive stance, the second is defensive stance, and the third is stand ground. Each of the stances have their own role to play. Aggressive stance is your primary staple stance. It is the default stance that your units will have when they are created. Most commonly, aggressive stance will be selected when your units attack one another. Defensive stance is used when you want to limit your unit's movement radius and for them to automatically recall back to their starting location once they have reached this maximum distance. This stance can be used to good effect when you want your units to remain within a certain area, such as defending a hill or remaining beside a castle. Stand ground is used when you want to make your units only attack when an enemy unit is within range. This is almost never used with melee units, bar some very situational examples. It is, however, used for range units of nearly any type, but there are a few exceptions that I won't be covering in this video. When you patrol your ranged units or attack move with stand ground selected, they will attack in a different way than they would if they were on, for example, aggressive stance. Rather than spread out upon contact, they will remain tightly grouped, which can change the way they deal damage by concentrating their fire, and remain closely grouped together. This is less effective when used against siege due to how these units cluster, but highly effective when used against melee units. I appreciate that I have mentioned patrol and attack move again, so I'm just going to cover this briefly. Patrol and attack move work in a very similar way, with one notable difference. Patrol creates a loop where your units repeat a backwards and forwards or left and right movement for an indefinite amount of time until cancelled. Patrol helps to take away some of the control necessary in continually clicking and requesting that your units move forward and attack. Your units will also attack the closest target that it comes into contact with, which is very helpful when the closest target will often differ from unit to unit within a group. Patrol is also fully autonomous, so your units won't put any thought into what they're fighting. Think scissors versus rock. It is therefore important to utilize patrol, but also keep command over your units when you see them doing something rather stupid. It can be used in a variety of situations, from patrolling outward towards an enemy, or being used in very close proximity to keep your units alert and acting as one. Attack move is basically the same, except it doesn't create a loop that lasts for an indefinite amount of time. Within a patrol, all units, including siege units, will attack the closest unit to them. This is especially important to note when you're in fights with other siege units. In these situations, manually select your siege units and click on enemy siege units that come into range. Similarly, there are also 3 formations to be aware of. The first of these is line formation, the second is staggered formation, and the third is flank formation. Each of these formations will have its own use. The general rule of thumb is that line formation is the staple formation, used for the large majority of attacks. Staggered formation is used to create a larger spread, thereby increasing their line of sight on enemy units or structures, as well as limiting splash damage, and flank formation is used to split your units into 2 groups. It's largely seen being used by experienced random map players to avoid archer and onager fire, but it can be used to great effect in deathmatch against onagers or bombard cannon fire too. Map control and economy. Let me break these down into 2 parts for ease of understanding. Starting with map control, it can be defined as the ability to obtain key strategic positions across the map. Well, that's good and all, but what is a key strategic position and what does that even look like? In practice, it's about spotting key locations, such as hills or gold nodes in the opening minutes of the game. This will in turn help you to identify areas around the map that you should be investing resources into, such as the building of castles or units that will help you to claim them. But when do I do this? I've got so much going on. I totally get it, and I appreciate it's not easy, even as a seasoned player. To begin with, however, focus on all the other points I've outlined in this video before you give this lots of attention. The reason is that there is a difference between good and poor map control and what this actually looks like. A more seasoned player will know the key locations across the map that will give the most benefit. For example, capturing a hill that provides that all-important 25% damage bonus, perhaps a bottleneck between trees or cliffs, and maybe a spot that claims 1 or more gold nodes with just 1 castle. Placement and forward planning in this regard is therefore vital, and it is important to remember this when you're playing 1v1 deathmatch. Losing too many key resources, relics, or advantageous map positions such as hills could mean that no matter your attempts, you succumb to being at a greater disadvantage for too long. Remember, a seasoned player will know when he or she has an advantageous position, and they may choose to sit a little tighter and be ready for your attack. You will often find yourself in a position where you have to play aggressively to claim a particular advantageous position, such as a hill or gold node. Players that have claimed this hill or gold node will be ready for this and expect it, thereby forcing you into positions where you suffer the greatest losses. Practice building outwardly with a few villagers as you become more competent in the other areas I've outlined in this video. Now let's take a look at economy. Now economy could be woven into unit control or general control because the two are often juggled between. I don't want to directly confuse the two, so I haven't ordered it in this way when covering each of these areas, but it is important to note. The reason it's important to note is because economy can often be seen as a side chore that detracts from the exciting bit, attacking your enemy. But building a sizable economy that works for you can be fun in both its placement and in its satisfying reward when it's working perfectly. I won't be talking to you about all the do's and don'ts of economy, but I will note that keeping your economy simple is one of the best ways to get it working. So what do I mean by simple? Well, keeping things simple is about making sure that you transition villagers to other resources as the game progresses. Think about how you transition your units in a game from paladins to halberdiers to axemen in the example of the Franks. These units, much like the resources collected, will differ depending on what the priority is. For example, the Koreans are very wood dependent and require a lot of woodcutters, perhaps as many as 70 or 80. The Persians, on the other hand, are very food dependent if you're creating the war elephant, for example, and may need a similar number of farmers. That being said, all civilizations require gold to some degree, and deathmatch players will often begin their economy by placing 2 town centers nearest to their main gold pile. From here, these villages can be put to other uses, such as to make farms, chop wood, or mine stone. In addition, woodcutters can be simply moved from chopping wood to building farms. For many, it can be easier to place a few town centers beside wood and waypoint creative villages to chop that wood, rather than to spawn idle villagers from the town centre or to have these clustering around a single farm. Villagers are bound to a set radius they look to when autonomously moving to create a structure, and farms are no exception to this. Therefore, you have a choice. You can make lots of farms around a town centre and manage the villagers produced, for example, or transition them from a different resource. Whatever way you choose, try to keep it simple and not pour too much time over it. You want to get back to the fight as quickly as you can, as this will always hold priority over a well put together economy. It is important to note that you don't want to create too many villages, so continually plan ahead to support that which you need. To conclude, Deathmatch is about fast play, big fights, pre-planning and forward thinking. Despite the large resources you begin with, you need to make decisions ahead of time and collect resources before they're later needed. If you adopt much of what has been covered, you will be well on the way to improving as a deathmatch player. That's the end of this video. I hope you found it useful. Please leave any likes or comments below and let me know if there's anything else you'd like to see in Deathmatch. Thanks for watching.